With our core damage dealing, shooting, and projectile setup, it's time to add something more engaging to shoot at. Let's create our enemies. So, going back again, once again, into our Unreal project. In our blueprints folder, what we'll do next is we'll actually create an enemy. Um, so for this, I'll actually right click on my BP base character. And I'm going to create a child blueprint class. Like so. And let's give this a name. And let's give it BP underscore, let's see, enemy character. Like so. All right. And in this new blueprint, we're going to open it up. And just as we did before with our player, we are going to set up our mesh. So in our mesh, select our SK mannequin, rotate it minus 90 degrees, and set it to position minus 87, something like that. Right? At the moment, our enemy is going to look exactly the same as our player. I want this to be a little bit different. So let's hit compile real quick. Let's hit save and select our mesh. And then let's have a look. We have a body and a chest logo material. Right? If I click on this one, let me quickly move things to the side here a little bit. If I click on the enlargement icon, I can actually go to the material. And let's have a look. Let's open up the material real quick. Like so. So the magnification glass thing, and then over here. And this is the material that they use. And as you can see, they have a body color parameter. And that's the default color that they use in the shader. So with that knowledge, I could actually go ahead and change this material through code to have a different color for our enemy character. So let's just do that. So I'm going to select my body color, and actually I'm going to copy paste the parameter name and head back to our enemy character. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open my construction script. Notice that because we are inheriting from our BP base character, our construction script is also calling the base construction script, which is fine. And I'm going to drag a mesh reference in here. So I'm going to get my mesh. And what I want to do is I want to get a reference to the first material that is assigned to this mesh, right? Why do I want to have the first material? If I have a liquid, the first material, so element 0, is the one with the body. So I'm going to fetch that, I'm going to get that material, make some changes, and then apply the new material to our mesh. That's our plan. So what I'll do here, I'm going to drag, I'm going to create dynamic material instance, like so. So I'm going to take the bottom one. So there's going to be the same, but I'm going to take the bottom one. And my create dynamic material instance is basically going to create a copy of my material, a instance of my material that I can then alter. My element index is going to be 0, which is correct. And that's the first one that I want to use. And then I'm actually going to take my return value and save it for later. So I'm going to right click on this and then promote this to a variable. And we're going to call this variable material instance, like so. All right. And after I have saved my material instance, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to set a vector parameter. So set vector parameter. I'm going to set vector parameter value. I'm going to copy paste my body color as the parameter name, like so. And I'm going to right click on my value here, and I'm going to promote this to a variable as well. And I'm going to give this a name, enemy color, like so. All right, good. So also don't forget to connect this. So let's hook it all up. And let's also expose our color. So it's a variable that is public that we can alter. All right. So if everything is correct now, we have everything hooked up. Let's go to our viewport. Nothing is happening yet, right? Still the default color. I'm going to click on my color here. I'm going to hit compile. Notice how now my enemy is black. I don't like black as an enemy. I want to change that. Let's change it to something that is like a little bit more enjoyable. So let's notice how it's changing color. Let's get some nice orange here, like some security, safety orange, something like that. Yeah, that's nice. Right? Doesn't You can pick any color that you want basically, but just notice that our color is changing, and that's because our construction script is always firing whenever we make changes like that. All right, good. So now we have our enemy setup, or basic enemy setup. It inherits from um, the same base script, so we should be good to go. Now, of course, our enemy, it won't do anything. If we put it in the scene, it will just stand there. It won't have any input whatsoever. So we will need a controller to drive the character. So instead of the player controller, we'll need a controller to drive the enemy AI character. So let's minimize this real quick. Head back to our blueprints folder. And I'm going to right click again, the blueprint class. And then we are going to create a AI controller. So if I open up all classes, I can search for AI controller. So, and I'm going to take the base class, I'm not going to take the other ones, I'm going to take the base AI controller here, like so. And then give it a name. I'm going to give it the BP underscore enemy AI controller name. There we go. Good. Let's open this up. And out of the box, you'll notice a couple of things. You'll notice that it has a transform component, it has a path following component, and it has a action component. Okay, for AI actions, and the other one for pathfinding, and then transform actually for the transform. Excellent. So let's open up the event graph. I'm going to right click, add a custom event. I'm going to call this event move to player. So whenever we call this, we're going to instruct it, well, move to the player. And I'm going to add a node called AI move to. So I'm going to take this one, a simple order for pawn with AI controller to move to a specific location. Okay, so I'm going to select this. And notice the timer on the in the corner there. That basically means that this will tell the pawn that is linked to keep moving towards the destination until it is within the accepted radius, right? So once it's close enough, then it'll stop. And because we standardized our controller and our pawn input design, this is just going to work. It's just going to give instructions to the pawn, the movement direction and the look direction and all that stuff. It's just going to do it automatically for us. So that's another benefit of using the gameplay architecture. So what will this need? It'll need a reference to the pawn. So let's get controlled pawn. Right? So because we are in a controller, so we're going to get the pawn that we are currently controlling. And our target actor that we're going to move to is going to be the player. So there's actually something that you can do that you can access from anywhere. You can get player character. So returns the player character null if the player pawn doesn't exist or there is no character at the specified index. So we're going to get our player character and move to the player character. When we are within 5 centimeters, kinda, right? 5, then we're gonna stop. All right, good. Now, this thing will not fire on its own, of course. We need to instruct the AI to call this move to node and kind of instantiate our move to behavior. So because it will keep moving towards the target, it has the accepted ranges, and we don't need to do this too often. So what we can do is we can just call this every once in a while, just to keep it updated and make sure that we are still following the primary player, should the player be respawn, stuff like that. So in the event begin play, we are going to create a timer. So set timer with a function name. Remember, we've used a timer before. And the function name that we will use is move to player. And the time is going to be every second. Now remember, I could also have a timer with event handler and then just link the move to player like we did last time, but this time I'm doing it with the name just to show it how you can set it up with the name. And we're also going to use a looping, right? So it's going to keep looping, keep going, keep going, keep going. Excellent. Now, this is a very simple AI setup, of course. There is also a system called Blackboard in Unreal. If you want to use more elaborate AI setups and advanced AI setups, I would suggest that you have a look at the documentation for that. But for our case, I just want the enemy to move to the player. That's it. Nice and simple. Okay. So let's hit compile. Let's hit save. And what I want to do now is I want to set up my BP enemy character to use that AI controller. So let's select the character in our components. And then let's navigate over here, have a look what we have. And there should be a pawn category over here. And then our AI controller class is going to be AI controller. So that's going to use the default AI controller should this pawn be possessed by an AI, so um, not controlled by the player. I want to change this. I want to use our custom AI controller, so I'm going to use pp underscore enemy AI controller. So that way, whenever we say instantiate the AI controller specific for this pawn, it's going to use that one. Okay, so let's hit compile and save. And we could now drag and drop an enemy in the environment. And if I'm gonna hit play, right, it's gonna stand there. It's not gonna do anything. That's because we don't know how to walk to the player yet. So let's fix that. For this, we need to set up a navigation mesh, right? We need to have a system so that AI knows where it can move. So we're gonna set up a nav mesh. Now, Unreal has this functionality implemented by default, and it supports all sorts of advanced movement rules, dynamic nav mesh generation, and so forth and so forth and so forth. You can still create your own custom solution for navigation if you want to, but that would also require custom implementation in the AI controls and so forth. But for now, we're using the default implementation. So how do we set this up? Well, in our place actors tab here, we can go to volumes and then scroll down until you find the nav mesh bounce volume. And then drag and drop that into your scene, like so. And you kind of want to make sure that this volume intersects with your floor and where you want everything to be, right? So I'm gonna move this a little bit, and I'm actually gonna use the values here directly. I'm just gonna scale it. So I'm just gonna scale it like so, and scale it like so, and just again make sure that it intersects with your floor. Otherwise it won't do anything. Make sure that it is something like that. All right. And then if I hit P, I will see my nav mesh. So P is the shortcut to toggle that. Now, if you don't see anything, That means that it needs to be generated. And what you can do here is under build, you can just build your environment. So make sure that your level is built, right? So it has the information. So just hit the build button. It'll rebuild everything. It'll build the lighting again as well. It'll rebuild your geometry, and then it will generate your nav mesh. Now notice that because of the way my volume is set, it also registers the top of my destructible actors. So if I, again, select my nav mesh bound volume, scale it down a little bit, let's see if I can see it like so. See, now it only takes the sides, so it doesn't go to the top. Now say that you don't want those destructible actors to also be taken into account, right? You can have a look at the documentation, how to set up dynamic nav meshes, but in my case, I don't want them to be affecting the nav mesh, so we can go to my BP destructible actor. By the way, in the previous video, it's probably called damageable actor. I just changed the name to destructible actor. It's not a big deal, but just a small thing, just so it's in line with the documentation that comes with this course. If you then scroll down to collision, so if I select my cube, right, and if I scroll down to the collision tab and open this up, then you can see can ever affect navigation. If I turn this off, hit compile and save, go back to my environment. Oop, I misclicked there, like so. Then you'll see that they're not taken into account and the enemies will just walk into them, right? And that is fine for now, for what we need. So let's see what happens now. If I hit play, whoa, here they come. They're really quick though, so it's gonna move to me each second. If he reaches me, it's gonna take a second, right? So depending on when I'm moving, see, it takes a second until he starts moving again because he completed his AI routine. Now the enemy is moving rather quickly, which is not ideal. It's moving at the same speed as the player, so you can never outrun it, which is never fun. So let's open up our BP enemy character again. And in here, let's have a look. Let's select our character movement. And let's make some alterations here. So let's see our movement, our general settings. No, I don't want that. I want to have my character movement. Networking, that's also not what I need. I need the walking. Ah, I looked right over it. And I'm going to change my max walk speed to something like 200. Okay. So let's have a look. Let's compile. Let's hit save. Let's hit play. There we go. Now notice that it's doing this in like 1 second intervals. And it's not that smooth, right? It's not lerping. It's not doing any of that stuff. So remember how we set up the player. So if I go back here to my character movement. And let's have a look. So let's go to my pawn to begin with. And I'm going to use controller rotation yaw. Let's disable that again, right? Because our I want my character movement to be in control of that. There we go. And then let's have a look. Let's move a little bit down. Rotation settings. Let's go over here. And I want to use my controller desired rotation. And actually disable that. Let's use my orient rotation to movement. Always rotates to my movement. Let's do it like that. So if we then have it running, see it's nice and smooth. And it's going to rotate to our movement. Like that. Excellent. Much better. Cool. I'll leave this here. And in the next video, I will actually start damaging the enemy.